Now let us consider a second useful feature of this partial equilibrium analysis and explore the market failure of externalities. Externalities refer to uncompensated external effects of consumption or production. This market failure of externality occurs when property rights are not assigned and the effects on third parties are neglected in the decision making. In case of negative externalities, as for example with many polluting activities, this leads to overconsumption and overproduction. This figure depicts the marginal external cost of banana production on top of the private marginal cost. It shows that the market outcome that was efficient in the previous figures is no longer optimal. Instead, in this situation with externalities, we find the social optimum where the marginal benefits of bananas, or marginal utility from consumption, equals total marginal cost, that is, both the private marginal cost and the marginal external costs. Reducing the production from QC to Q star is welfare enhancing because the marginal external costs outweigh the rents from production. In other words, the production between the social optimum and the market equilibrium outcome still benefits consumers and producers of bananas, but the additional cost on third parties outweigh those private benefits. Neoclassical economists recognize that the market failure of externalities gives rise to environmental problems and usually offer two solutions. First, Pigou suggested to introduce taxes equal to the marginal external effects in the social optimum. Here we see that the tax is levied at the consumer where the demand curve moves downward, similar as we have seen before. When set at the right level, the tax would ensure that consumers internalize the external effects of their consumption and the equilibrium production would equal the social optimal Q star. This figure shows a tax levied at the producer where the supply curve moves upward, again similar to as we have seen before. Again, a Pigouvian tax set at the right level will reduce production to the social optimum. While Pigouvian taxation sounds straightforward enough in theory, in practice, however, obtaining accurate estimates for the marginal external cost in the social optimum is no straightforward task. In the next lecture, we return to this when discussing the social cost of carbon. For the other solution, neoclassical economists argue that the problem of externalities arises due to the non-existence of markets for the externality in question. This other solution is widely known by cap and trade and was first offered by Ronald Coase. Here the idea is to create a market for the externality in question, where a regulator determines the size of the market by establishing a certain number of emission rights. For example, the right to emit greenhouse gases or sulfur dioxide. Coase argued that it does not matter for the outcome how property rights are distributed. That is, trade of emission rights would occur as long as marginal cost of abatement differ. That is, producers who value rights to emit more are willing to pay more for these rights, and producers who find it less costly to reduce emissions are willing to sell their rights to emit. Naturally, distributional consequences depend on whether these rights are assigned based on historical emissions, also known as grandfathering, or that rights are auctioned. In simple models about externalities as presented here, a regulator can arrive at the same optimal outcome by either correcting prices to reflect true cost to society through Pigouvian taxes, or the regulator sets the quantity of allowable emissions directly and lets the trade of emission rights find the cheapest emission reduction possibilities. In case the cap has been set correctly, the resulting market price for emissions will equal the Pigouvian tax. In other words, the resulting price for emission rights then equals marginal external cost of production in the optimum again, provided that the cap is set correctly. I postpone discussion of the relative merits of Pigouvian taxation vis-à-vis cap and trade again until the next lecture.